Um, yeah, so my name is James Bott. I am what am I? I effectively run two agencies, or I'll come to that in a minute. I studied D&AD, which is Design and Art Direction. I studied that in Manchester. So I probably similar routes to yourselves, or probably quite different. I don't really know how it works, but so I did my GCSEs, I did A-level 2 years. Then I had to go to college to do a foundation course, which was a 1 year. Because I'd done A-level, I could do the 1 year course, and that allowed me to do a 3-year degree at Manchester. And I was in D&AD, which is quite a handy title because a lot of the awards of the industry, the Oscars, if you will, of the advertising industry, one of the main ones is called the D&AD Award. So I like to put that out there. But even though it was just my course title, to be honest, it's quite amusing. But yeah, so I finished uni, and that was, to be honest, I didn't learn a great deal at uni. It was, I mean, you learn, you only sometimes realise afterwards what you've learned. And certainly in my case, and there was a lot of design work, typography. There wasn't a great deal of thinking. They used to tell you about thinking and go try and think laterally and literally and laterally and sort of expand your mind kind of thing. But it's only after when you're actually in industry do you start getting the projects, or you potentially start working with the teams or people that you can then start applying it. You think, actually, I realise now why I was taught that, because at the time, certainly for me, you're probably way more intelligent than me, and that's absolutely fine. But I couldn't always see, how is this going to get me a job? How is this going to be? Because we weren't really doing max skills. We weren't really working on production. So when you came out, you had a bit of a way of thinking and ideas, but it wasn't really honed down. Like the first job I got was a place in Macclesfield. It was I took me on a bit of a team that worked in a church, which was quite cool, a former church. So all the Macs were laid out on these overturned pews, and it was really cool. And you go down the aisle to get to the production manager to get your job, and you go back up. Lovely setup, mezzanine floor level, really cool. I went on a Mac, and I was taken on to help this new business guy come up with some ideas for the company to try and promote them. They said, oh, by the way, while you're thinking of that, can you just do this job for me? Can you just put it, 3mm bleed and CMYK and make sure all the images are X, Y, and Z? I didn't have a clue. I did not have a clue what to do. So it's weird. Sometimes uni doesn't teach you the absolute how to build a brick wall, but it can teach you sort of almost how to sort of be, architectural in your thinking. But sometimes you do still have to lay bricks. That was one thing about uni. So anyway, I progressed from there. So for a while, I went to another design group more locally. Was doing freelance in Manchester at the same time, befriending people, speaking to people, trying to get in a situation where I was happy to stay for a while. And I ultimately ended up working a few agencies later. I stumbled across, because the idea is London. London is it's still the kind of look to London, or look at what London does, as it were. And I came across in the newspaper. Now, in fact, it was one of the secretaries it was reading the newspaper at lunchtime, and said, "Oh, look at this! Some guy from such and such has just opened up an agency over in Stoke-on-Trent, of all places." And I thought, right, okay, because Stoke's a lot easier to get to than London every day. So I immediately made a beeline, found out who this guy was, Richard Grisdale, and said, "Look, I just want to work for you." Blah blah blah. It wasn't about money or anything. It was just I need to learn from a proper team, and clearly he has got loads of experience. He's got far more than I ever realised. And so I worked with him for about 3 years. I was an art director. An art director would you typically work, the big agencies, Lydia might know this, working in McCann's is often a team situation. So you'd have a copywriter and an art director. It's not to say that the copywriter couldn't come up with the visual idea, and it's not to say that I couldn't come up, or the art director couldn't come up with a strap line, and then the copyright would polish it and take a few words out and make it snappier. So it works both ways, but often in the big agencies, traditionally, it was copywriter, art director. So I was taken on effectively as a creative and progressed to an art director role. And that was absolutely fantastic. The best place I've ever worked. I've worked for some great big agencies, and I've done a lot for London agencies and Manchester since. But the way that was done, it was so potent and great and ridiculous that it was in Stoke-on-Trent, which is obviously quite a humble. I don't know. Let's say it's not traditionally the most forward-thinking town in terms of, it's very creative, but you just wouldn't expect this London agency to be there. The chap Richard, he came from I think it was Woolstanton, which is so he travelled around the world, worked for all the big agencies, and then came home basically and set up an agency there. I worked with him for about 3 years. Met my friend Steve Wolfe, copywriter, and we just knew it was time to move on and try it for ourselves. And of course, you work with people for a while, and you suddenly think you know it all, rightly or wrongly, and you think, well, why don't we do something? So me and Steve left and set up Honest Creative, or Honest Limited as it is now, and we just carried on the mantle that we were taught. We're doing freelance. We're still writing for agencies, multiple agencies, but we had our own clients as well, and do have our own clients, private clients. And it was the whole big idea thing. You'd come up with a strap line for a brand, which is true to what it does, but then you can bring it to life. It's loose enough that you can bring it to, it's like the Enjoy Coca-Cola. Well, you can bring in the word enjoyment. You can expand that and go in loads of different angles. So that's what we did for people. We come up with a big idea, such and such a company, the such and such and such, the strap line, but we'd write it, or variants of it, so that we could go off in these crazy kind of, ridiculous situations. And it's the same, what we were doing there and what the agency before we learned of that it was the same, whether we were working for British Airways, whether it was working for Michelin Tires, or Caterpillar, land moving equipment, JCB, worked for both actually. Whether it's those with big budgets, or whether it's literally Bob the Builder in Macclesfield, it doesn't matter what the budget is necessarily. The idea and the thinking can be as big and as wonderful, and you just scale it then to budget. So you can give Bob the Builder in Macclesfield, you can give him something which is actually really cinematic, even though actually all he's asking for is a business card, but you can come up with an idea which might just run on the back of a business card. So when you hand the card out, you're taken aback, and suddenly there's right, okay, so what do you do? And it's just a conversation starter. It could be the front of a brochure. It could be the top of the head of the website, the masthead, the hero thing, or it could be a billboard. It could be a magazine ad. But you can do that thinking, as we found, for anyone, and that was the revelation. Because usually you find a lot of agencies, they talk about B2B, business to business. They're doing really boring work, but actually, or the boring clients. But actually, problem is actually not the client so much. It's more the agency. They think small. They think boring because that company's boring, and that is not what we do at all. We would make you, laugh out loud or cry or shocked by literally just some kind of pokey old, shot down the road. You can do that for anybody. As long as it's relevant, you've got to be very relevant to it. And the way we do a brief and take the brief, which has been gleaned from over the years, there's a way of extracting even from what might seem the most boring and sort of dull, moribund company. There's a seed of, there'll be something worthwhile in what he or she is doing there that you can, take and grow massively and really make it exciting. Take the USP, there's always a USP. And if there isn't, you can almost sort of, there will be one somewhere. Sometimes the client doesn't know what a USP is, so unique selling product. It's unique selling point. So there will be something, a little tiny nugget, a seed, and you can grow it. If you know what you're doing, you can then take it to these crazy levels and create cinematic work, which rivals the likes of BA and all these classic brands, Volkswagen and all these. So we were doing that. We're doing very well. And yeah, we've worked for loads of clients, and at the same time, we've managed to do a lot of work for other agencies at the same time. There's a bit of crossover there. Why would an agency use us? Because if you've got private clients, is there not, will you try and take our clients? So you've got to be very careful how you do it. Managed over the years to get a good balance between the two. And it's the key thing is sort of, why have one boss if you can have multiple bosses? Because if one decides they don't need it anymore, you've got another 10, you've got another 20, So that was the other thought. Let's not get made redundant. Let's have multiple bosses, and then hope that they don't all fire you on the same day, So that was the other reason of starting a company. It's very tough though, because of course, just jumping around, the idea of starting a business, the easiest time to do it is when you don't have anything. You might have a little credit card with a few bits on it, but it's next to nothing. As soon as you start getting into car ownership or, payments per month, and house purchasing, rents. It's a lot. I know a lot of you probably, you either in or beginning to get into that, but because you're still in the sort of the system, that's absolutely normal. That's absolutely fine. When you start going down the road of all the trappings or whatever, you can sometimes get trapped in a job because you don't move just in case it didn't work, and you don't start something. Of course, stupidly, we started Honest. We left the company in 2008, just as the crash happened. So it was absolutely horrific. So we'd gone and thought, oh well, this will be easy, and it was rock hard. I mean, it was about 3 months or 4 months just hemorrhaging money. We had mortgages to pay, cars to pay. It was an absolute shambles. I won't even go into the finances of it. But we set it up from nothing. We didn't invest because you couldn't actually get a small business loan to do anything about it. You couldn't even get an overdraft to help you out. It was just it had to work, and we made it work, thank God. But there's never a good time. But the best time is actually when you don't have anything, in terms of having to commitments per month in a crazy way, because they soon get out of control when you start getting into life itself. So we got through that awful period. We did some work for McCann, as I was saying to Lydia, McCann Erickson, the big agency down the road in Macclesfield, and we were jobbing around. And we got some clients. It was all great. Then suddenly, suddenly you're winning a few things. You're winning pitches. You're winning awards, and then suddenly you're sort of 15 years down the road, and it's all going fine. And then sort of COVID happens. What we found was we were doing Steve was my colleague Steve was doing more and more stuff for charities. We were doing some stuff for Bernardo's, and it became a writer's role in London. So we could service it, but actually it was more Steve's bag. He was the writer on the job, and so he basically went over there as a permanent fixture. I don't think it was an intentional thing, but it just happened that way. But with remote working, you can be anywhere, can't you? You can be doing literally anything, we'll come back to the relevance of today for that. GB advertising is more of a modern is a modern move for us. What we did was, so Honest's still going, and it's going strong and good. Should I admit, Molly? Yes. Hello. We because of the thing with first the fortuitous thing was Richard, who we'd kept in touch with, sort of mentor of old. He was just getting sick of places he was working at, so he started going freelance, like a lot of people do. And so he went to somebody, and he was showing work that he'd been doing recently, showing his book, his portfolio, and they said, Richard, this recent work, it's really well written, but I don't know who's done the art direction, but it's not right. You wouldn't want to be showing people that. And he said, okay, well, yeah, the idea is good though. So yeah, I can see the idea. It's always well written. Your stuff's very great, but yeah, whoever's done that section, that later section of your book, it's not very good. What you want to do is go get who did that bit there and who did that. Go and get the guy who did that earlier work for you and get him to sort of remaster your folio. And so that was me. And so we hooked up again, and we got on, and then we started doing work together. So we revamped our folio, put a joint offering out there. And then agencies started being interested because of COVID and bits and pieces as a sort of team. Because again, agencies, they might put staff on furlough, but they sometimes need to still furnish, they still need to furnish clients with stuff. And so we sort of had this little niche of a writer, art director, like the old school style. And lots of London agencies and Manchester agencies started being interested in this. But the Honest brand at that point wasn't really right. And we wanted it to encapsulate where we were now and the whole the freelance team aspect. And so what we did, we were just stumbled across with Grisdale Bott, GB advertising, this massive big idea. You can imagine the different directions you can go. It's such a big idea in itself. It's the grand, it's almost like the advertising domain, Great British Advertising, whatever you want to say. But it's Grisdale Bott, that's ultimately what it is. And so we launched it in COVID and had a bit of fun, did a photo shoot, sort of like a double act, 2 heads are better than one. And, I was stuffed into the same jumper. And we did these little skits, and then we sent them out as e-shots and just to drum up interest. A lot of them to the senior players in London and Manchester. A lot of them liked that kind of humour and comedy. It was a little bit Dudley Moore a classic duo, Dudley Moore and Peter Cook. That was where the inspiration came from, you know, well-written, odd comedy. So that was really the basis of what the first campaign we did for GB advertising. And from there, Honest still is going great. And there's clients who would only use Honest; they wouldn't use other people, or they certainly wouldn't really be. There's no reason for them to use GB. So it's like there's a bit of a split of the client base, and we go after more working for agencies directly on a freelance remote capability. It started off as a joke about remote working, and suddenly, you know, everyone, even you guys, you've taken one of our USPs. We thought that was good, that we could do stuff remotely. We did something recently for Mercedes-Benz trucks and Mitsubishi Canter, which is a van, automotive work. We did that entirely remotely. I wasn't even with Richard when we did it. He was just working from his own base. So we thought that was a you know, we thought that was a great benefit. Everyone did, and of course now suddenly everyone's working remotely, so it sort of lessened it a bit. But yeah, that's where GB came out. It's Grisdale Bot, and it's effectively a freelance offering, purely creative, so that takes us to the current day. That's my story in a nutshell. You know, uni, worrying, getting out there, getting involved with other companies, trying, you know. The other thing I would say as well regarding jobs, I never went to one interview. I never answered an ad in a local paper, never a LinkedIn ad. It wasn't really LinkedIn so much back then. You pick a company that you fancy working for all the time and just ring them. It used to be a Yale.com search, advertising agencies, Northwest. I just work through it, get a folio together. That was my thinking, to show them something visual, and just knock on the door and just get a conversation going, just to see if there might be something. Because a lot of people don't have time to think, oh, we need more capacity here. They just struggle on. And you knock on the door and you might get the person who goes, actually, yes, we could do with an extra pair of hands, thinking about it. Yeah. So although they haven't gone through like Indeed and all those recruitment agencies, sometimes just the old knock on the door at the right time does work. And if it's the wrong time, as long as you do it with humour and being pleasant, say, you know, I'll look, why don't I leave for a couple of months and I'll ring you back, or, you know, I'll give it a couple of weeks, have a look through, I'll send you something over. I'll maybe give you a call next week. I know you say there's nothing on, but, you know, humour me, show me, you know, point something out on my folio that I could change, send some stuff to them. And I got all of my jobs from that situation. There was never a job going. And of course, the benefit of that is you're not going to be huddled into, like, you know, a job which has been advertised and there's 50 people applying for it, 100 people, 200 people. You cut all of that out, you know, so you don't have to sort of, you know, you're not one of the many, you know, you're be the few, be that one person who's knocked on the door and just said the right kind of thing at the right time. I know it's very sad to say that, but that sometimes I've had a great deal of luck, touch wood, doing that method. I've never done one ad. I've never responded to a job required ad, which is interesting. Yeah, so that's my early part. I don't know if Lydia wants to step in, but that's me in a nutshell, how I got to where I'm sitting here today, you know, watching you on Teams. I don't know. Is there any questions about that? Because this is the other thing as well. You don't often get to talk about it, and so it can become a bit of a ramble. I'm very aware of that. So do step in if there's anything you fancy saying or whatever. But what was the thing I was going to say? Sip of water. Do you guys? I don't know whether. For me, it's all about the book, the portfolio. I don't know whether many of you have done much physical, creative work. It might be theoretical stuff, but it might not necessarily be scribbles on a page or Photoshop work, and it doesn't have to be any of those. But even a thumbnail sketch, a rough. A book full of those shows someone's thinking, and it can be literally as good as something you can scribble down on the back of a cigarette packet. Just something really, really kind of basic, but it shows thinking, you know. And it can be, you might not be able to use Photoshop or a Mac, but you might be able to just do a scribble. And if you do it, you know, black marker pen on white paper, dead basic. Circle for a head, you know, a couple of eyeballs. You don't need to make people look real. The mind will fill it in. But sometimes a book full of those is as good as a book full of Photoshop work. Of course, if you're good at Photoshop work, great. There's always probably going to be someone better than you at Photoshop, so that sometimes it's best not to even try. But it's always good to have a few thoughts. These might be sketchbooks, it might be, yeah, just various different methods of collecting who you are and who you can demonstrate it to. So I'm going to put a question here, forgive me. I'm missing all these questions. It's like a treasure hunt to find a Teams link, it certainly is. Yeah, a lot of people do create their stuff online and a Wix or WordPress website. Yeah, just anything you could just show. I can send you a link. You can go to gbadvertising.co.uk, and actually within 5 minutes you'll get to see exactly what we do, exactly who we are, and you will see examples of past work and recent work. Just a place to go. Have to be, obviously we could potentially show finished ads or finished print ads. You don't, it could be a you know, a website just done with scribbles. Here's something I thought of for Nike, and here's, you know, not just one idea, here's the other 2 ads that would, you know, here's what the next ad would look like, and here's the third little mini campaign for Nike. It doesn't mean you're saying you work for Nike. It just shows that you've done some thinking. You know, came across this the other day, it reminded me of this, I did some scribbles, you know, just really basic. You got an iPad, you can just sketch it out, that kind of thing. So although we obviously think ours looks good because it shows actual physical work, just to show an area that you can just demonstrate yourself. Because what you don't want is just simply a CV which, you know, will sit on a pile of other CVs and look reasonably similar. Someone might have better typography skills in Microsoft Word, but on the face of it, it might look very similar. And people don't always read, sadly, people don't always read everything they're given. And so what you don't want to do is just, there's my CV, that's it. Get some visual evidence of who you are in front of them, I would say. What do you do when you come across a creative writer's block? Now, that's a tricky one. It happens a lot. You know, and it gets easier with time. The first time, I remember I went to work for an agency and they gave me what they were saying was a boring brand, and they sold it to me. It was in a company called Ingersoll Rand. They make generators for road. Like, you go past someone digging a road, they'll have a generator for the drill. It's like a box thing plugged in, pumping away, making noise all day, gives them the power. Ingersoll Rand is one of the brands who makes international, you know, road diggers equipment. And he said, "Can you just come up with some ideas for Ingersoll Rand?" I said, "Yeah, of course I can." Yeah, this was my first thing out of uni. This was just a friend I knew already in industry, and I thought, yeah, I'll go and do some work for him. That'd be easy. And I didn't have a clue. And I've been pestering him for years. I've done a lot of work experience with him over the years. His agency since 5 years before uni, even I was doing GCSE. Always had a laugh. He showed me on the Mac. I could use the Mac then. I could do visuals. So then it came to after uni. He said, "Yeah, we haven't got any roles for you, but could you just come and do some scribbles for us? Come in." I said, "Yeah, absolutely." I went in there, and he went off for lunch or something, and I sat there with a blank pad and a brand new, you know, nice magic marker, and I didn't have a clue what to do. And I thought, I've just done a 3-year degree, and I've done work for them in the past, and I have got there is no lead in the pencil. I don't know what the hell to do. And I'll be honest, I spent, he was in and out, so he didn't see me doing nothing. And I came up with some half thoughts, and they were all rubbish. And I know they were rubbish. And I just said to him after 2.5 days, I said, "Rob, I'm not going to come in today." I said, "Oh, why not? Why not?" I'm not doing anything for you. I have no idea what to do. I have not got a clue. And he said, "Well, yeah, well, fair enough. And it's just horrible. Conversely, after working with Richard at the agency I mentioned in Stoke, I went back to see him because suddenly I had a book of big ideas that I could suddenly get it. I could show him stuff. And I went in and he goes, "I can't believe it." I said, "I remember when we last met." He says, "Because you know I'm a friend of yours." I said, "Yeah." I said, "And there was nothing there, was there?" There was nothing. I said, "There wasn't." I said, "I'll be the first to say." I said, "But this stuff, this is better than what we're doing." And that was the transformation. And that's by working with someone who knows this stuff, or you know, getting some experience. So that's the benefit. So those days will happen. What do you do? The other, there's a list of books I'd suggest you read as well, or dip into, or at least examine and understand what they are. A lot of them are from the year dot. You know, they're from sort of the 50s, the 60s, advertising textbooks, and you know that they're hopelessly out of date in some respects. They're often very male orientated. One of them is called, I put my bookshelf here. Yeah, how to become an advertising man. See that somehow? Can we see that? I'll put it into the because it's white, of course. It's doing a green screen thing. How to Become an Advertising Man. It's an excellent book, because ignore the word man, just put woman in front of it, and then you know that book is an excellent textbook, but it was just written up from a certain era. And the guy who wrote it, James Webb Young, he talks of this. When you've got a brief in front of you, you know, you've got what the client's asking for, where it's advertised, where they're going to be advertising, why they're advertising, what the audience currently thinks, all the information. Just saturate yourself in it. So you know, you're doing something for Nike. You know, what have they done recently? What did people like about it? What didn't they like about it? What's the next ad? You know, what's the thought now? Are they doing a certain campaign for a certain reason? Could it be for a new trainer, or is it for a, you know, there's a movement in society that they want to try and capitalize on, or at least you know, sort of show that they care. Maybe whatever Nike's doing next, for example. Nike's not the best example, but you know, saturate yourself in the brief, saturate yourself in every single aspect of it. Read it, reread it, turn it sideways, read around the subject, and then, as the book says, you can go away. And one of my lecturer friends, Sue, she puts this far more eloquently than me. She uses the correct scientific terminology, which I just simply can never remember. She'll hate that. She did say she might be coming here, so I'm hoping she isn't, to be fair, because she'll correct me on this. But what happens is, you saturated yourself, and then go and do something completely different. Down pen, put it to one side, go and play tennis, squash, just disappear, go shopping, go listen to some music, and then go to sleep. And have you ever had this? You might have like a tricky situation, might be at uni, might be back in the day at school, and you know it's a big problem, and you're struggling with it. It might be a financial thing, you might be about being bullied or something, I don't know. And then if you wake up in the morning, sometimes you think, wait a minute, that's actually not that big a deal, because I could just do this. Or you know, you had an issue with finances, and you wake up in the morning, and you think, actually, if I just did that and then that and spoke to them, that's sorted. With a creative brief, it works the same way. You could saturate yourself and go to sleep, and the incubation period works it out. So where when you go to bed, you might have a blank piece of paper. In the morning, often you find you can write. Often you can find you've got a starting point, because something's happened overnight. And you can really make a head. Your brain works in a very strange way, and it can just give you clues overnight. And so you just got to trust that can happen. I mean, it sounds totally absurd, but that incubation, using the incubation period of the unconscious mind, helps you get around this creative block. And never beat yourself up about it, because sometimes when you beat yourself up, that makes it harder. Just relax, go and do something completely different. And oddly, you know, I'd love to give you an absolute definite, but I know this technique just does work. It's not something you really have to practice. It just happens as a human response to something. Your mind wants to make connections and resolve things. So if you just go to sleep, your mind's working, and it can sometimes present you with at least a starting point, or sometimes a whole bloody campaign when you wake up in the morning. As odd as that sounds. Yeah, you probably would edit all that out because it's all garbage, but it does work. It does work. Sorry, I'm not looking at these chats here. Let's have a look. We got it. I'll go back through some. I just had it. Do you find personal values and beliefs influence your work? I guess they do to some extent, and they probably do more than I realise. For example, my father died of smoking. We did have an opportunity to work for a big tobacco company, and me and Steve were we could have made an absolute fortune on it, but you know, and there's cars to buy and watches to buy and houses to buy, isn't there? But well, we didn't do it. We declined. We didn't even go to the briefing. I mean, it wasn't even a pitch. There was an aspect they wanted us to work on, which is a little known tale. That so yes, I mean that's a personal belief or personal choice. You know, there is at the same time an anecdote of Saatchi and Saatchi, Charles Saatchi. Saatchi and Saatchi, by the way, so I'm sure you're aware, was one of the first cutting-edge advertising agencies. Maurice and Charles Saatchi, they set up in London, and in the 70s, and they brought sort of American-style modern ad thinking to the UK market and back internationally. It's definitely worth having a look at them. The poster child of what a classic agency should sort of be back in the day. And in fact, on my blog, I'll direct you to it. There's a really good BBC documentary which was on a few years ago, which is it's about an hour long, and it charts sort of 1960s or 1940s advertising up to present day, or as of maybe 15 years ago, and it's an amazing story that you should listen to regarding the rise and fall of the ad man or the ad person. But that's a fascinating one. Anyway, just going back to the smoking thing, I didn't do this cigarette thing. Maybe I should have done, but my father did die of emphysema. Charles Saatchi, there's a famous story as to when he went round an emphysema ward and saw all the people dying of cancer, terminal cancer. He went round and spoke to get a bit of information. Sometimes you want to speak to the people you're going to be speaking to with the ads. So he went round there, spent some time in this cancer ward. Must have been horrific, and then he took some notes and a few ideas, made him think, and then he went home or back to the office, lit a cigarette, and wrote the ad. So it's a kind of, in a way, yes, you've got to be who you are and stand for what you do, and there's certain work we wouldn't undertake. Although, again, does money talk? And actually, all we're meant to be doing, are you doing someone a disservice by not doing the best work for them? This is a bit of that. I hope that kind of answers that kind of question. How do you think creativity in advertising will change? I've definitely seen the rise of the digital agency, right? The digital agency. So there's the advertising world, the madmen world, of the creative thinking of interesting ideas and selling to the people, thinking of new ways of doing that. The rise of the digital agency, of which most in Manchester and perhaps locally to you, there's loads of digital agencies, and they say they're specialists in social. They say they can do websites. Actually, all they could do was code. They were just coders, bedroom coders. We all maybe like to have a dabble with coding or putting stuff on the web. And then, so when the advent of the internet and websites, clients then thought, oh God, we need a website. We need a website. Who can build us websites? At the time, agencies couldn't really do that. They were into the creative thing, but they couldn't lay the bricks of a website. They couldn't build a website. And even today, a company who creates a product, brand or service wants a website. So they go to an agency, typically, often a digital agency, one which grew out of the bedroom of just doing code. And it's a crucial thing to do, obviously, with digital. But what they don't know is, so they get the website for the digital agency. Oh yeah, we'll put you out on social because that's a digital platform. We know how to use Facebook, but they don't understand the message. They don't understand the creativity side of how you turn people on to making them not choose that, but choose that. And so what you found is that there's a lot of agencies or a lot of digital agencies who end up with really good clients, but actually they don't really understand the messaging side because they were never trained in that. They were just doing HTML and Java malarkey. They weren't doing the creative, the writing, the visuals. They weren't doing all that. So I think, and we have seen through GB advertising, that actually we do a lot of work for digital agencies because they've realized that if you could do a website and you can do a website and it looks fine, well, why would they come to that one rather than that one? Well, if that one can write and amuse people and can create not just the website, but the assets that go on it, the advert looking kind of big billboardy things which really grab you, that then would make them stand out as an offering. And we do a lot of work for digital agencies, nothing to do with coding or websites, but we can create the amusement or the brutality to put on them, the messaging. So creativity never really goes away. I mean, there's the whole thing about big data and, this data suggests that this person will buy this because of this. Well, and that's absolutely fine. But the problem with creativity or the world or human beings, we are illogical. We aren't logical necessarily. We don't always do things logically. So you can guess what someone might do, but you really don't know what they will do. For example, we're told how terrible McDonald's food is, you know, because it's salty and it's crap and rubbish. But there's always a queue outside the door. Why are people going there when we know it's rubbish? Why is there a queue outside the door? It's because we're illogical. You know, if you read that fact about McDonald's, you wouldn't go. I'm not saying anybody here goes to McDonald's, but why is there a queue outside the door of McDonald's and we know it's rubbish? It makes no sense. And so big data can't always predict that. Data can't, or it can tell you the logical way, but what about the illogical person, which we all are? Well, the illogical man or girl, everyone's doing that, so I'm going to do that. Everyone's zigging, so I'm going to zag. That's where data doesn't work, you know, because that data does not fit into that common graph. There's some outliers, and actually there's loads of outliers. You know, for example, not getting political, but why did if the data on Facebook said that everyone was going to, you know, Labour was going to get into government, and what happened? Even miners who were staunch Labour people who hated the Tories back in the day, they voted Tory. Now, data never suggested that would ever happen. It's illogical. But then when you start to think about it, there's a truth in it. And that's actually what happens. The data did not predict that. You can't predict. It's creativity of thought and simplicity. Why did Brexit happen? Well, there's many reasons why it probably should or probably shouldn't have happened. But it was get Brexit done, get Brexit done. The repetition of keywords and creative phrases, it changes people's opinion. Whereas data says, well, it shouldn't happen because of this, it shouldn't happen because of this. And what happens? It happens because people vote with the you know, they've got a mind and a heart, and they make different choices to what data. So just going back, and this ridiculous circuitous rant I've just gone on, I think there's going to be a rise, or there's going to be a kind of an opening up for creativity again, because the digital agencies know what they're doing up to a point, but they can't predict the unpredictable. And creativity can spark that unpredictability. And that's how I would answer that question. Let's go through some of these. Is this making sense so far? Is it sort of in amongst it? There'll be a few nuggets of worthwhile talk. I'm sure. What have we got here? Beliefs. Important to have your own creative style thinking. Is honesty the best policy in advertising? That's an excellent question, and it is. I'd suggest honesty in advertising. Well, one, it has to be honest. It has to come back to a seed of truth, otherwise it'll be banned, because that's what the ASA say. But I think honesty is the best place to start digging to find the truth that you'll be able, you know, where that seed of interest is in the truth of a brand, and then from that you can go, you know, really big and magnify it massively. So honesty is absolutely crucial. Hence, obviously, the reason we call people perceive advertising to be lies. You know, it's all lies and nonsense, and a lot of it is. But actually, the best advertising is based on a key fact or a key truth in the brand or the service or the product. So it's absolutely. And then you can be so fantastical and crazy, but when you come down to it, you're allowed to do that because it's all backed up by truth. And that's, you know, telling the McCann Erickson again, that phrase used to be the truth well told. So you can say to stat supposedly, but it doesn't mean anything. But you can retell that stat, that true fact, in a kind of really left of field way, or this sort of crazy way, which makes it indelible, and you'll remember that stat rather than just putting a stat on a piece of paper. So yeah, the truth well told is one of the ultimate strap lines for advertising. So honesty in advertising is absolutely paramount. You know. What else have we got here? Yeah, so regarding portfolios again, I would definitely make sure you got some kind of online presence, a LinkedIn page, at least maybe with a bit of PDF or a PowerPoint presentation just to introduce you. Try and put your personality into it and understand what you can do. There might be two people in this room now who, might have the same grades, the same interests, and the same similar views, let's say. So on paper, you might be seen as quite similar. So if you're whittled down in an interview to two people and everything's pretty, similar A's, etc., which one's someone going to choose? So you've got to almost invent that way, that difference. And it can be simply how you present yourself or present your work, or more importantly, your thinking, because people buy into thoughts. People have their own thoughts, but they want more thoughts. They buy ideas. And so coming back to the folio thing, just something to present yourself in a different way. It could be ridiculous. It could be humorous. It could be just something to make that person stand out slightly more than that person who is on paper very, very similar. Very tough game to do. But again, there's clues in history. If you look back in, not just history, if you look back in certain advertising spheres, various ads for, if you look at a sector, it could be toothpaste, it could be car rental. Okay, so there was a battle with Avis. Obviously, they do the exact same job. They might have, very slight differences in how much the car costs to rent. Okay, so which one do you go with? Sort of, whichever one's there nearest the door of the airport. I don't know what makes the choice. Well, Avis were the second. Hertz were the first. They were the biggest. They were the most well known. So Avis ran this ad about sort of why should you come to the second best car rental company? Why choose second best? And they reasoned it in this ad. It was a nice copy, long copy ad, and it said, well, we can't unlike the person who's in first position, we can't rest on our laurels. We can't afford to have, cigarette ash in the, in the ashtray when you pick the car up. We can't afford to just give you, a quarter of a tank. So we always make sure we give you a full tank. We can't afford to have, the seat completely out of position, or the car not set up ready to drive away. We can't afford to do that. Almost supposing that maybe the ones at the top do that because they're number one and they don't really care so much. And they gave all these reasons why actually, and them trying to be the best. Maybe you should pick the one who's trying the hardest, and that's the second. And then they basically said, I think go with Avis. The queue will be smaller too, and so there's all these crazy benefits which are all truthful. So there's two companies doing the same thing, or there's two people, so what can you do to elevate yourself and make them think more about that one? If you've got two chocolate biscuits, you've got the own brand or you've got the McVitie's. Which one do you go for? Do you go for the McVitie's because it must be better, probably better, quality, etc., it's worth paying more? Or do you go for the own brand one, which you think actually they've got less chocolate, that's maybe better for me, or they're cheaper and I can buy more of them, or I'll buy the cheaper brand because it's actually probably made by McVitie's anyway. You make the discrimination. It's almost hoping for discrimination in a positive sense. I want you to buy my product rather than that one, and they might be very similar products. Advertising can make that swing in your mind. When you go to the shelf, you buy Coca-Cola rather than Pepsi. It's that little 2%, that little nugget just before you, makes you go that way on the shelf, and it's kind of crazy, but that is those little influences for the messaging, and that sometimes makes you make that decision, and that adds up to crazy big sales. So we're talking very, very small percentages. What have we got here? Any more? If you could give one piece of advice to your university self, what would it be? I'm not too sure about that one. I'll come back to it. As in when I was back in the day. If I was being completely honest, I'd when you're at uni, it seems a while, and then suddenly the sands of time starts ticking, and suddenly you're in your third year, and you know you're out the door into the big wide world. I don't think I was always consciously aware of that, and I probably didn't enjoy myself or drink enough wine as much as I should have done. I've certainly made up for it since, but at the time I could have done a lot more than that. But I was very paranoid. I wanted to get a job because I wanted to get some money so you could start moving on. And money's an awful thing, but regrettably we do need it. It's a grotesque subject, money. But I was so stressed about how is this silliness going to get me any job, you know? And everyone's going out having a laugh, and I wasn't doing so much of that. I had all opportunities to do it, and I did go out there, but I didn't really take advantage of university for university's sake, and I wish I'd done that in many respects. It's not really a regret because I'm fine now. But I know that there's a lot of worry, and sometimes you can't really worry too much. So you should just not worry. I'm a worrier. I still am. It's probably only recent years I've actually stopped doing it. So I would take advantage of just enjoy uni for the sake of uni, because you'll get to these difficult stages anyway, trying to find jobs. But that would happen whether you've had a laugh or not. So I would just have a laugh. The other thing is I would be very interested in your subject. I'd read around it. I'd keep reading. I'd read about the history of it and key figures and key agencies, and just be interested, so you know those, because you might end up speaking to somebody, and if you could just drop a couple of nuggets in, they suddenly think, oh right, you know your stuff. And sometimes that can, you know what, I was speaking to such and such, and she really knows this. We should get her in, you know, just because they remembered some kind of ridiculous thing that you've read, some ditty about Saatchi and Saatchi or something. It goes a long way. So reading around the subject, I didn't do any of that at uni. So I will publish this things to read list on the blog. All I did was worry about getting a job. That's missing the point. Let's have a look. Is this something you wish you had learned or been told about advertising? I wasn't told a great deal about advertising. I wish there was an advertising society at my uni in Manchester. If there was, they didn't advertise it very well because I never knew about it. I was actually saying in the build up to this, I think it's a really good thing that you guys are doing this, because it shows forward thinking. I don't think I was forward thinking enough. Let me just go back to the question. You learn more about advertising. You can only learn it properly when you're out there, understanding, when you get into the mesh of it. So what I would definitely do then, I would read up look at the classic agencies and some of the more modern agencies, the cool ones. You might even know who the cool ones are in your own city or whatever. Find out about them and just understand how they operate and work, and know about their work, know what they're doing at the moment. So when you do ring them, oh, I saw your campaign for such and such, it was great. Have you done anything on social for that? Because I'm not sure I've seen it. Or I like that second one you did on I saw it on Insta. It was great. Have some points of interest. Just again, research around your subject. We were never told to do that. It's such an obvious thing to do, but suddenly you're finding you have to pick the phone up to people. And what do you say? What do you say? That's the thing. Arm yourself with things to say. That's something I would definitely do. Uni never taught me that. Uni doesn't. It's a weird thing. Uni teaches you a lot, but it doesn't tell you. It sort of teaches you a lot and nothing. But it opens your mind so that when you're ready, it maybe turns you into a sponge. It doesn't give you much water though. When you're out though, you're desperate to find these things, and you do soak everything up. So maybe it trains you to have that sponge kind of capacity to intake, to lap up information. So maybe it does that. It's weird. It's one of those things you can only see it in retrospect. How can we discourage the ad blocking culture? Write better ads. That's one thing. There was a time, probably more my parents' era, when the Times magazine supplement, the Style Guide, or the Times magazine was a glossy freebie which came with the Times or whatever. Every paper has them. But there was a time when those ads that went in there were so well written, so well shot, that actually they were as interesting as the articles themselves in the magazine. the reason we block ads now is there's a lot of that scary, creepy tracking stuff. Where I go and look at something on M&S, and then I go over to Sky News, and suddenly all my basket's effectively at the top of Sky News. It's like, what the hell's going on? No one likes that. I don't particularly think it's good. There's an argument to say that actually it's beneficial, because if I've forgotten something, it's reminding me again. But I haven't necessarily asked for them to do that. That's the creepy thing. So ad blocking is, I think, good for that. But if the ad is amusing, you know, or it's shocking, you want to send it to your friends, you know, well, that's a good thing, and that will stop. The unscrupulous will still get blocked, but actually we won't mind ads. There was a time when advertising used to be a point of conversation around the the water, the water. What's the word? Yeah, the water cooler. Or it was something you'd talk about, you know, to your mates at school. Did you see that, such and such, like that? And it made you laugh because it was so ridiculous, you know. That hasn't gone, but it's so many media outlets now. We just get awash with it. But if you think of something clever, it will get potentially noticed, because if it's amusing, it's always going to be funny, isn't it? And so things just work. But the reason I'm glad a lot of the ads are getting blocked, but the good ones you're still seeing. But there isn't many good ones out there, so you know, there's opportunity.
This might be a really tricky question, James, but what piece of work would you say you're most proud of, and why, if you can pick one?
Oh God.
Sorry.
No, I've done a few, and I know Richard he's more eloquent at speaking about this process, which you really enjoy his next one. But you know, he says about 2% of the work that you want to get out there gets bought. It either gets diluted by the client, or it doesn't run, whatever. And he's got some great ones. I've got, you know, there's the stuff I've done for. There was one execution I did for Caterpillar land moving equipment, which sounds boring, but it was this. It was like a load of hard-hatted workmen with yellow hard hats. It was part of this. When you buy a piece of land moving equipment, they send these people, that whole team, one to monitor the oil, one to monitor the dust intake, and one to make. So this team comes out when you hire a piece or buy a piece of land, Caterpillar land moving equipment. JCB do the same thing. So how could you say that in a way that only could be Caterpillar? Well, when you put these yellow hard-hatted workers in a line, it looked like a Caterpillar, you know, and it was something really nice about it. So that the ad could. It was saying what JCB could say, but it had it effectively had this, you know, line of guys who looked like a Caterpillar. That's the kind of thing I love. There's a number of them, to be honest. It's difficult to think offhand, but that was one I particularly liked. But we've done stuff for the National Trust. We've done much more worthwhile charity stuff, you know. And again, Richard's got some great ones, and he's got some really beneficial. You know, this ad equaled that, or this ad. Yeah, we for example, we did one. We sent an e-shot out for a P&O, and it paid for the campaign in 180 seconds. Yeah, that's the nice one to tell your mother, you know. Richard did one. He sold 40 barrels of whiskey and one insertion in the Telegraph from one ad that he wrote. It's a really long, amusing ad. Takes through this, you know, and then that sold 40 barrels, which I can't even begin to equate the amount of money that raised for the provider. So there's all these different testimonials, but there's a lot on the site actually. You know, of course, the minute this call ends, of course, I'll remember them all, but they're all on. They'll all be on there, I think. Yeah.
I think this is a good question to finish on, actually. What makes a good client-agency relationship?
Clients are bad at being clients, and because no one's taught to be a client, and there's a saying sometimes you should let the plumber do the plumbing, and it's, you know, it's not a phrase that's often used now, and in fact some of the weaker agencies would say that actually their job, and in fact I've heard this firsthand, that their job is to do exactly what the client says, which ironically is the most dangerous comment and the most dangerous raison d'etre of somebody's position, because if you're supposedly, you know, I wouldn't say a master in your field, but if you've got the experience of your field and someone hasn't, but they can make a widget better than I can make a widget, well, what do they know about telling people about it, and what do I know about the widget? So you've got to work in total harmony and understand each other's product and each other's, what that person's bringing to the table. You typically don't tell a solicitor how to do her job. You don't necessarily, you might ask for a second opinion, but we kind of rely on the fact that a doctor probably knows more than me about medicine. In fact, there's a huge possibility that is the case. So with advertising, people get so precious about the product, and rightly so, then they start trying to weave and move it around and change the message. They can either water it down, or it becomes so safe, no one's going to read it, and no one, it's not going to pull or get any clicks. And so ironically, that safe ad, that safe execution is such a dangerous waste of money, and it won't get noticed. So you might as well get noticed. That's the thing, isn't it? Get noticed, and don't water things down and be brutal and be bloody and be amusing and make people fall off their chair with laughter, and they won't forget you. That's what I'd say. So it's that relationship. The clients are bad at being clients, and that's often a shackle. It's very difficult. But there are some agencies who are purely set up to just say yes to the client, and I'd suggest to you that is absolutely. Not only do they sound ridiculous saying that, what a terrible. I don't know why they would get out of bed in the morning. Create something great for a client. Don't just say yes to their little idea. Build on the little idea. If they say we want something like that, don't just say that's rubbish. You could elevate that massively with your experience. But if you see them aiming there, to just say yes to them, I mean, what a dangerous situation for both client and because the agency will get fired because they were no good.